basically giving, I think, the most essential and agile and powerful formula perhaps ever written. It's a formula for overcoming anything and everything that life throws at us. He says, when people obstruct our proper tasks, they become irrelevant to us, like sun, wind, or animals. He says, our actions may be impeded by them, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes, the obstacle of our acting. The impediment to action advances action, he says.
Sorry.
What stands in the way becomes the way. And so you can imagine being 19 and reading that passage, or you could be 78 years old and read it. And what's so striking about that is he's describing this formula, this idea that anything and everything that happens to us is actually an opportunity. As I wrote in my book, this is what the Stoics meant when they said the obstacle is the way. Instead of the obstacle preventing us from doing something, it's actually presenting us with the ability to do something new. So you're on a flight and it gets delayed. What are you going to do with that time? Someone is rude to you. Are you going to use that as an opportunity to have a confrontation, or as an opportunity to practice some self-control? You're working on a project for your work, and all of a sudden the computer deletes what you've been working on. Is this something that makes you irrationally angry, that you just sort of quit and give up? Or do you decide, I'm going to do better, I'm going to do more? How do we look at our flaws? How do we look at obstacles? How do we look at the problems, the inevitable frustrations of life? Do we choose to see them as opportunities, or do we choose to see them as unfair obstacles that have been put in front of us? And so I think it's interesting that Marcus Aurelius is actually in this passage talking specifically about difficult people. He's basically saying people can be your allies, but they can also be your enemies. And when they get in our way, how do we choose to react to that? What do we choose to do with someone who has lied to us or deceived us, someone who has acted against our interests, someone who is, impolite, someone who is not as smart as us? How do we choose to react to these people? Again, do we see these as opportunities, or do we see these as obstacles? And I think if always you go, I am going to see this as an opportunity, you get better. It allows you to move the ball forward. If you decide to see them as obstacles, if you decide to see them as impenetrable, then in a way you're also right, and you won't move forward and you won't get better, and life is unfair. So it's up to us. Do we decide to see the obstacle is the way, or do we decide to be in and to stay in our own way? Thanks.
All right. Well, I wanted to show that because, one, I like showing something every time we get going here. And I'm reading this book right now, The Obstacle is the Way, and I subscribe to the Daily Stoic podcast, as well as this Daily Stoic has a book where there's like a Daily Stoic like message for every day of the year. So I was also thinking this is kind of cool because, one of the things Tucker's going to talk about today is a deal is made, not found, right, Tucker? And so this is kind of like the obstacle is the way, right? Like, so every time there's an obstacle or an opportunity in front of us, it's more of a waypoint to help us figure out how to get over it and get through it, and then as an obstacle to turn around and run. So anyway, thanks for letting me show that. Tucker, welcome. How are you?
I'm great, Matt. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today and catch up with you.
Okay, well, this is awesome. Thanks so much for doing this. I'll jump right into it and introduce you because I know you have a ton of cool stuff to talk about. So I met Tucker back at Skyline High School, circa 1993, 94, something like that. Tucker was a little younger, so he actually knew you knew my little brother a little bit better than I knew you back then, right? But we go back to the Skyline High School days as well as Sandy area days, right? Because you grew up in Sandy, didn't you?
Yep, right by you.
Awesome. So where Tucker and I reconnected was really, what was it, about 2011, 2012? Independently from each other, we both decided to enroll and do the MRED, the Masters of Real Estate Development program at the University of Utah. And so it was check-in day, I remember. and like you go get your bag or whatever, or like, and Tucker was there. So it was like, oh, this is awesome. Tucker, how you doing? So anyway, we reacquainted doing the MRED, and Nate Worthen, who's watching the call, he did the MRED with us. So that's where I got to know Tucker, is doing the MRED. So we did the MRED together for a couple years, right? And then, you know, we've just stayed in touch off and on since 2015, and you guys are going to love kind of like Tucker's experience. So I'll give you a little bit more of a bio, and I put it in, you know, kind of all the ads for this call, but 17 years of experience. Tucker understands the current real estate investment market in Salt Lake City and surrounding areas. Tucker has successfully facilitated the sale or purchase of over 6.5 million square feet of office, retail, and industrial investment property with a transaction volume of more than $1 billion, with an emphasis on building personal relationships. Tucker has built a vast network of industry colleagues extending from real estate agents, attorneys, and lenders with extensive experience in working with both institutional and private investors. Tucker brings a unique perspective and sophistication to commercial real estate investing in Utah. Tucker is a CCIM designee and former president of the Utah chapter of CCIM. He currently serves on the Utah chapter's board, along with being active in ULI, ICSC, which is kind of more of a retail thing, and NAOP. Tucker received a master's in business administration from Westminster, and then, like I mentioned, an MRED from the University of Utah. Known as a thought leader in the industry, Tucker participated in the NAOP CCIM Symposium presenter, CCIM RealCon presenter, and lectured at the University of Utah School of Business. And he actually also teaches courses at the University of Utah's MRED program. So, Tucker, what did I miss, man?
Nothing. I wrote my own bio, so I guess you can make yourself sound as cool as you want when you write your own bio. But
well, that's kind of the point.
No, that sums it up. But no, I'll kind of go back a little bit further.
Dude, please.
And kind of start where I began. And really, it was 2002 was my last. I think it was my last semester at the University of Utah doing finance, and I took a real estate class from Darren Liddell. You know Darren.
Dude, I think I was actually in your class. Because I took that same class from Darren Liddell.
I was trying to figure. Yeah, I was really trying to figure out what I was going to be when I grew up, and I took that class. And I think one of the books, what most everybody on this call has probably read, was Robert Kiyosaki's book. And I learned about income real estate, and I was just blown away. So from there, I just tried to consume every book I could and try to figure out how to get into the industry, right? This was 2002, 2003. And I didn't know many people in the industry, so I just started feeling my way through it and ended up landing a job with Eli Mills. I think you know Eli, Matt.
Yep.
And Eli is just a total stud. He's still just one of the best investment brokers in the business right now. So I landed a job with him and started working on. And I'm going to share a screen with you because I'll kind of walk through what we were doing. Because I was with him until 2017, so 2003 to 2017. Let's see here.
And while you're pulling that up, how did you make that connection? So Tucker, just so you know, and I kind of told you this, the people on this call, we range from people that are doing, like residential agent, buy and sell stuff. We have commercial guys, we have some land guys, we have a lot of, flippers. We have guys looking to get in commercial. So, we kind of got the spectrum, people that are just starting, people that have been doing it for a while. So how did you first hook up with Eli? What was your process to kind of like find that mentor, that first job?
Sure. So that's a good question, because I'll go back to saying what I didn't really know anybody in the industry. And to be completely honest, at the time, didn't even realize there was much of a difference between commercial and residential real estate, right? That's how naive I was and just had no clue. So I started opening up the phone book. Yeah, back then I did still use the phone book in 2002, 2003. Awesome. And I started calling all the brokerages and, narrowed it down, started realizing who some of the top brokers were, and just really tried to get in with those guys and luckily enough, I landed a job with Eli. Started off, making, I think, I was 22 at the time. I think I was making less than $1,000 a month for a full-time job. And, but I was just excited to be in the industry and learn from one of the best. So that's kind of how I got in. I just felt my way around and tried to network and try to figure out who were the players, who were the right players. I thought about trying to get in and do it myself, but being so young, I knew that nobody would trust me with their large assets, right? Because I knew that I wanted to get in and get transactional experience on investment properties. I didn't do any leasing. I've never really been a leasing agent at all. I've only done investment sales.
So did you, though, intentionally go, I want to get into commercial, or were you just kind of calling like, I'll just find out, but you're maybe learning along the way as you make calls to different brokerages and stuff like that?
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't know at first the difference, but then after I started learning it, I really wanted to get in the commercial side, and I liked the investment side. I liked analyzing income properties. So yeah, I definitely wanted to get on the commercial side and found my way in there.
Cool. Awesome. Can you make that screen so it's like full screen?
Let's see.
We're seeing like your notes in the next slide, and if not, we can figure out what you're talking about. No, that blacked it out.
Let's see here.
Re-hit that same one you did. There you go. Now
Which
maybe, yeah, I don't know why it's not doing full screen, but that's okay. We can see what you're doing. That's all right.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Technical problems here, but so hopefully you can see or get an idea of this is the kind of stuff that Eli and I were doing from 2003 to 2017. We were going in and advising high net worth individuals, helping people sell and buy office buildings, shopping centers, industrial parks, all sorts of buildings like that. So we would build relationships with these guys and do the analytics and come up with a valuation and then come up with a marketing process, just like you would with a residential home. That was what I really wanted to do, just because the big thing that I wanted and I recognized early on was I needed transactional experience, right? That's the key in it's just doing reps. And I obviously did not have money at the time or, the know-how on how to put these deals together. So being able to do it and learn from people who had the money and who had the experience was so valuable. And that's what
not with your dime, right? You're not risking it yet.
Yeah. And I literally probably didn't even have a dime then. So it was good because I got to build some net worth, save some pennies to be able to then, I think, so I bought my first deal. I started in 2003, bought my first deal 2008. Well, actually it was October 2007. So pretty ideal time to be buying real estate, right?
Dude, great time to buy high, man. You're doing it right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was a great way to be able to get in, like I said, do reps, learn how to do the analysis, learn what products do what office is like, what retail is like, what industrial is like. I did not do any multifamily, but those three products I became pretty well versed at underwriting and figuring out how to force equity and how to drive value, right? So a big part of what I do now, and I don't mean to skip forward, but I learned back then because I was really looking at how these assets are positioned in the market, what you need to do from a capital expenditure standpoint, from a leasing standpoint, how to position these assets to be able to push rents, to be able to cut operating expenses, thereby increasing NOI and increasing value, right? So that's really what I was focused on, and that's what I'm trying to do right now.
So that's awesome. I mean, I think the fundamentals of real estate, whether you're doing a small deal or a big deal, are the same. right? Like for people that are out buying their first fix and flip, it's a similar analysis. What is this going to be worth? What's it going to take to get there? What do I need to buy it at? And how long do I need to hold it? And how do I need to finance it? When you're dealing with these commercials, it's just a lot more moving pieces and a lot bigger dollars, right? But what you're telling me is it's a very similar thought process as analysis. It gets very complicated because there's a lot of nuances and, it's a different level of sophistication. But at the end of the day, you just got to know your numbers, right? What's it going to be worth? What do you need to put into it? How do you get there? How do you finance it? Who the players are?
How do you raise equity?
How to raise equity and say, cool, this is great. We're going to kind of talk about each one of those. So along the way, though, these are examples of kind of deals you've done. Maybe just quickly, knowing that these are all different, give us, especially those of us that haven't done like a commercial investment deal like this, typically what are your time frames? And this will maybe lead into like, a more of a specific deal that you're doing yourself. But like, what are the typical players in something like this? Like for residential stuff, we just know, you either need your own cash, you might need a hard money lender, you need a title company, you're done, right? Like kind of walk through the process from start to finish just quickly on say this Mill Rock office, 490,000 square feet.
Yeah, that one's a big boy. So, I mean, it depends, right? That one was actually developed by just a couple high net worth individuals. And they bought the ground and they spec'd the building and they built it and then sold it to institution. An institutional buyer came in and bought it. So you've got all sorts of buyers. You've got high net worth guys. You've got institutional buyers. You've got REITs. You've got these different life insurance companies that will come in and actually buy assets as well. So you've got all sorts of players. You've got guys that will only do ground up development. And then once they stabilize it, they're merchant builders, right? That once they stabilize it, they sell it. You've got guys that are long-term holders that just are looking for the cash flow. You got guys that will only buy stabilized. You got guys like me that I try to buy undermanaged, underleased assets where I can go in and reposition it and through a better leasing and management structure, force equity and push, like I was saying, push NOI up. And then maybe sell it, maybe not. It just depends on the market. But yeah, I mean, the life cycle, I think, is what you were asking on these, can be very long.
Yeah.
Can be painfully long, right? And sometimes you get caught in different market cycles. That's how long some of these take. And it depends on if you're doing a ground up deal, from an entitlement standpoint to before you even come out of the ground. It can be a couple of years, right? It can be a long time. And then the stabilization part can take another 24, 36 months. But if you're like me, I'm not necessarily into the ground up. I've done a little bit of ground up that we can talk through, but my philosophy and what I like is buying existing assets, right? So then I don't take on the entitlement risk. I don't take on the construction risk. I don't take on the stabilization risk. I like to buy them where they have under market rents and they've been neglected, by under management, and to be able to go in and put lipstick on it and push rents. That way, it's a shorter timeline. I have some income coming in at the time, right?
Yeah.
These guys that develop just have a long period where they're only shelling out cash. Those guys make higher returns than I do, but they take on more risk and more time. So that's why I've kind of chosen to go the route I'm going.
Cool. And then we're going to talk about that all, like maybe the financing advantages or not versus doing existing or development. But in your life here, because I want to transition to, White Buffalo when you kind of went out on your own, your world here is, yeah, you're maybe getting involved in a deal or two on your own as a principal, but really, you're acting as a commercial broker making a fee. Call it a commission, call it a fee, whatever, right? Like in representing these transactions, either the buyer or the seller or both, your involvement is to put it together, connect the parties, help them evaluate the deal, and then collect the fee for your services when it closes.
You're exactly right. Yeah, which many days now I look back and think, gosh, why did I get out of that? Because your only risk is your time, right? Now, yep. When you're on the principal side, you have so much more at risk. You have your capital and you have, personal guarantees and you have, your time as well. So it was a great job and a great way to, like I said, do some reps and get involved. But yeah, that's essentially what I did. So that's why in 2017, I looked at it and I said, I've been doing this since 2003. I think that I understand this well enough. I think I've done enough reps to where I can go and I can raise equity. I can recognize where deals are, and be able to actually start to go and do it myself. So that's when I made the jump in 2017. Maybe could have done it earlier, maybe could have done it later, but that's when I chose to do it.
Awesome. So let's talk, before we get into that, and we mentioned it in your bio, but along the way too, you're going and getting your, because one thing I think is important to continue to highlight for myself, and obviously for everyone else listening, is the constant need, especially as an entrepreneur or someone that's not, like working for the corporate man, to always be doing and improving yourself, personal development, networking. You graduated from the U, you got your MBA at Westminster, you got your MRed, you're involved in a bunch of different groups at this point. CCIM, for those that don't know it, is what's the commercial investment
manager? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a really prominent designation in the commercial real estate world. So how important was that to get you, not just your experience with Eli, but, getting your other degrees? And I mean, was it just credibility? Was it experience? Was it networking? Was it all of the above? How do you look at that part of your life?
Yeah, I mean, it really was kind of all the above, and then which then added to another kind of soft skill, which becomes confidence, right? Understanding.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
That you understand and know how to do it and can speak to it with some level of authority, which that translates into when you're raising equity, and when you're out trying to convince people to sell to you. So yeah, in 2005, I did the MBA at Westminster, and all along I was doing, like you mentioned, the CCIM program, which everybody listening, I would highly suggest getting involved with CCIM. It's a couple of things. It's an education. They have a great education for commercial, understanding how to invest in commercial real estate. It's fantastic. Just lots of information you've got. They'll teach you, they'll give you the spreadsheets, they'll walk you through it. It's pretty extensive and in-depth. So, but I highly recommend that. So I worked my way and got that designation, and then joined the board and got involved that way from a networking standpoint. All at the same time, I was, you mentioned ICSC for retail, and I would go to conferences, ULI, which, I don't know, Matt, I think that you're somewhat familiar with ULI.
Yeah, I mean, when we were doing the MRAD, I went to a couple of those, but they ended up being, way too high level for my world that I'm in now, the Urban Land Institute. But I know some of the people on the call, like I know Jared's on the call, Roger maybe has been, checked out ULI, probably Nate as well. But yeah, ULI is Urban Land Institute. That's a bigger picture national organization, right?
Yeah, they're very macro, but they have really good literature. If you want to get in kind of the macro high level stuff. So yeah, ULI is great from a thought leader standpoint. NAOP locally, I would suggest getting involved with. That's more on the ownership of office industrial, but another great group. And these guys will typically have monthly meetings and then kind of larger annual meetings, and they're not overly expensive. If you stay on the local chapter level. So yeah, I would highly suggest getting involved in that. So I was doing that. And not only that, I'm sure from when you just transact and do deals, that's when you build relationships with other people in the industry, right? So
yeah,
that's really kind of where the main networking came into play, is just transacting.
Got it.
And people learning how you operate, people trusting you. It's such a small world. It's a really, really small world, and reputation is everything, just as in every other industry. So, yeah, just being a good person, having integrity, will pay dividends. For many years down the road. So.
Dude, I love it. Your story holds true with that. Everyone, friend from high school texted me when I did a little Instagram story to promote this. She's like, "Oh, I love Tucker," and so I think not to like, I think a lot of your success has come from what you just said. Like, you're just super nice. You do what you say you're going to do. You're honest. You obviously are smart enough to figure out these deals, but that couldn't be understated enough. That like that reputation is everything. All right, so the MRED. Now because this is where I was talking to you about this time where you're like, I maybe want to kind of go do something on my own, right? So let's transition to White Buffalo, and then we'll dive into maybe a couple of your deals, because I know everyone's going to love to hear those. Actually, before we get onto that, people also love to know money. So if you're comfortable sharing, a fairly successful, commercial broker, what kind of fees annually? Like, you're transacting, you're grinding. Some of these take 2 or 3 years. Some take a year. You're dealing with high net worth people, probably really emotional people, a lot of drama. Like, what kind of income would you say on average you're kind of making as a commercial agent that's pretty successful?
Such a good question. It's interesting. I really think the 80-20 rule applies in brokerage, where 20% of the people make 80% of the money, and they make a lot of money. But before I go into some of the highs that you can have, I'll start with some of the lows. Like I already mentioned, how starting off, I think I was making less than $1,000, right? So you start off very, very low. So it's a barrier for people who have high burn rates and families and want to get into it. That's a true and real obstacle for people to get in. I've seen people thinking they can get in, and they thought they had enough runway, but just got down the road and couldn't make it, because it does take a while to ramp up, and you don't make money. And then going back to some other lows, even after I was somewhat established, 2009, I wish I had it. I could show you my tax return, and it was zero. In 2010, I don't think it was much better, because I had a lot of, I had overhead, I had assistants, I had everything. So we'll start off on the very low to be able to share that it can go. Yeah. So it's not all rosy, but on the high end, you can, if you hustle and work hard, $500,000 to $1 million a year is not uncommon. So yeah, it can be good during the good times, and it can be really bad during the bad times. So it's feast or famine. It's eat what you kill. So you better be ready, and that's got to be something that you like. And
last question.
No 401k, no insurance, nothing like that. So
everyone on this call is used to that for the most part, but
yeah.
And as far as average, maybe a couple deals a year, 4 deals a year,
so
3 deals a year.
On the investment broker world, we average probably around 12 to 15 deals a year.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we would do. And then, if you're doing leasing, some of these leasing agents are turning, 80, 90, 100 deals a year. So it's pretty high volume for those guys. Obviously, that's a lower fee than an investment deal, but I guess it depends on what you're looking for. If you wanted to, if you liked that volume and the surety of having, because obviously if I'm doing 12 deals a year, if one falls out, I really felt that, right? That's a big dip in income. But if you have 80 or 90 and a couple fall out, it's not a big deal.
I love it. All right, let's jump into White Buffalo.
Yeah. All right. Let me see. There we go. So yeah, 2017 is when I came and I started White Buffalo Partners, and I've kind of already hit on kind of the mission statement, but it really, I saw in my job as a broker in Utah specifically, there's a certain kind of owner, and the owner is a person that likes to do a lot of things by themselves. They like to do the leasing by themselves. They like to do the property management by themselves. They would skimp on tenant improvements, capital expenditures, and they would skip on leasing commissions, which that's the lifeline of deal flow and leasing, right?
Yeah.
So my whole thesis was to go and find these type of properties owned typically by generational kind of owners, and do the opposite of what they did and put the money into it, and thus hopefully push values and push income.
So to speak kind of an analogy to residential, you're kind of looking for grandma's house, someone that's owned it for many, many years, maybe doesn't love doing the repairs and the maintenance, doesn't love pushing tenants to pay a little bit more, doesn't like bumping up rents each year, but otherwise has probably a fairly solid building that's, you know, been financed pretty well or paid off or something, right? So that's kind of the asset profile that you're started out looking for.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think that's a great analogy. And, you know, I went into this thinking, because I have the experience of going and hustling and finding them, right? So it's somewhat hard finding commercial ownership information, but I had that experience. So I'd go through, I already had the database built up, and I just started calling owners and saying, hey, I'm no longer a broker. Would you sell to me? And it was interesting. A lot of their guards were let down, because then, hey, I don't have to pay a commission. Great. This is great. Even if you're going to pay less than if I took it to market, that's great. Because in their mind, they thought they were getting a great deal, that they didn't have to pay a fee, which is funny. So yeah, all the deals that I've done, I can't think of any that were on market. I just go out and hustle and dig them up, cold call, network. Yeah, I can't think of one that I've done that's on market.
That's awesome. This is great. So maybe talk about, once you left the investment world as being a broker, more of a full-time principal, which one would be the most interesting? I know you've done a couple. Maybe talk about your office building, or where were you going to, your next one that you were going to go to that you put together.
Sure.
Or I also want you to talk about that bank deal. That one's going to be super interesting for people. We had a call with a guy named John Prince, who kind of talked about something kind of similar that he did, and the point of this too is, like, one of your slides is going to say real estate. What is it? Real estate is, what's the phrase you use? I'm spacing on it right now.
Deals are made, not found, or something.
Deals are made, not found. And I love that, because you're turning, something that may not be perceived to be the use that it could be into, like you're going to talk about this townhome project. But anyway, I'm cutting you off. Go for it. Keep your flow going. You're good.
Let's see. You see that? Can you see that picture? Is it still?
There you go. Now we're looking at the lobby area.
Okay. Yeah. So this was a deal that I cold called on. I was driving by and I saw that there was a leasing banner that was for lease by owner. So I called it. I said, hey, do you want to sell? And it was the exact profile that I talked about earlier. They said they've owned it since the 80s and they could go do some other projects. So you just look at it and you see, let's see if I can you see my mouse? You see how dark the hallways are and just how dated and not much of an update. So I went in and I bought it, and I'll show you. Let's see. This is what I did. I brightened it up. You can see I added a lot of lighting, modernized the lobby, modernized the office, and did some exterior work and did something similar to that. I took it from 80% occupancy to about 90%, but what was really the most important number is that I took average rents when I bought it were about $15, and now average rents are around $19.50 or $20. So you can see.
What does that equate to in the value of the building?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe a value, an equity push of $3 or $4 million.
It's awesome.
It depends on where what cap rate and the day. Yeah. But yeah, from where I bought it to after doing that NOI, pushing the NOI and improving it and increasing the occupancy, about $3 or $4 million. Now, we can talk about this later, but I don't get all that money, right?
Sure.
I've got investors, and we can talk about how that's done a little bit later. But so that's one example of what of what I've done and what I'm trying.
So before we move on to this one, just to clarify, you cold call, found this building. It clearly had some upside that the current owner either wasn't willing to do or didn't see. You jumped in, bought it. Let's talk later about, in general, how you put together a deal like this with, when we're talking millions of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Clearly fixed it up. It's looking good. That then attracted either a better tenant or a tenant that's willing to pay a little bit more. Stabilize the value, meaning your value is now at what, residential guys in investment will think of as an ARV, after repaired value. You have this value now set really high, and then you'll talk about it. You probably recapitalize your asset, maybe with, financing it long-term on a different kind of loan, which in our residential world, we call that like a BRRRR method: buy, rehab, rent, refinance, right?
Oh,
So,
I do the BRRRR method. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, it's awesome. Like, we talk about this in residential, but this is just an office with a lot bigger dollar signs and a little bit larger scope of work. So this is really cool. So equity push, creation of value of about $3 to $4 million. That's awesome.
And I think it would be interesting to know on this kind of stuff, other ways to make money besides being involved in the capital stack, involved in the equity push. But there's also things that you can do, and I'm assuming it's the same residential, but you can get fees for acquisition fee, you can get financing fee, you can get asset management fee and property management fee. So asset management would just be kind of the global overseeing property manager, overseeing leasing, overseeing the making sure that's done. Property management would obviously be making sure that the toilets work and everything. So those are ways you can make money. You can make money on the disposition fees. So there's many ways to take bites of the apple. Now, having said that, you want to be very, very careful not to nickel and dime your investors, because they can get fee fatigue, I guess is the right way of saying it. So I don't take those all the time, but those are the different ways of being able to make money, not only being involved in the equity, but being able to keep the lights on while you're asset managing it, and making some fees along the way.
But it's a great point too, that you're doing kind of all of this maybe on your own and operating it, wearing all those hats. But, as you build up the capabilities to be able to maybe pull this off on your own, maybe someone could just fill one piece of that, of that puzzle, right? They could be someone that, whatever, right? So there's, even though maybe you are taking the bites out of the whole apple, but someone apple can go around the table, right? And be shared a little bit.
Yep.
Cool. Let's talk about, that's awesome. Let's look at the next one.
Okay. This next one, same sort of thing. This one right here, I'm going to be turning it into dental office. So same sort of method that I used on the last one, pushing into dental. Now this is I should talk about what's going on in the market, right? Because obviously this is a troubled situation where obviously with what's going on with COVID, they're not doing well. And I'll share kind of, I get their sales reports, right? And they have gone from, let's say they do $200,000 of sales in a month. Now their sales are not that, right? Yeah. They're like $2,000. So there's problems right now with owning these kinds of assets with sit-down restaurants, for obvious reasons. You get tenants now coming and saying, "Hey, I can't pay rent," and then you say, "Well, okay, let's have a conversation because we're in this together, and you need to start negotiating half rent or something like, hey, I got debt service, I got to cover." So I'm getting a lot of that from quite a few tenants. Some other things that I've done, and I don't know if you're able to do this on the residential side, but I've gone to lenders and gotten 90-day deferral and tacked it on the back end of the loan. So I'm able to do some of that to be able to help with some cash flow, which then allows me to, give these guys some relief as well. I pass that through so that everybody is doing well.
It's a win-win.
What's interesting though is that a lot of these guys will have come back to me, and after negotiating the rent down, they've come back and paid in full, and their rent in full. And I was wondering why that was, but a lot of them, have PPP money that they need to reinvest. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when that PPP money runs out and everybody's really relying on true revenue on what's going to happen, and kind of go into my buying strategy. Obviously as a buyer, I want to buy from distressed sellers like you guys do. But that hasn't happened. And I think largely because a lot of owners, a lot of income's being propped up by exactly what I said, by rent, by debt service relief, like I've received, and by PPP money for rent. So it's going to be interesting to see if this thing goes much longer and certain tenants that don't pan out well, what kind of distress is going to be coming down the pike. Because there really is not any distress right now in Utah.
That confirms what we're seeing on the residential side as well. Okay, so one of these, you're converting, an existing maybe retail or office to dental. What are you doing with this Sizzler?
That's a good question. They still have a leasehold position, so they're going to be paying. If not, I'll reposition it to either another sit-down restaurant, which, gosh, I don't know who. I've already reached out. No one's really having conversations on expansion like a Denny's or an IHOP. So this is a big question mark for me right now. I don't necessarily have a plan. This goes back to what my thesis was, or my mission statement was, is buying assets with under market lease rates, right? Where lease rates that I can easily replace. Now, easily is hard right now with today's market, but I think I can go and find an office tenant, like a title company or somebody, to replace the rent for what they're paying. Because the way I underwrote it was they were paying super cheap rent. Don't ever buy an asset that has above market rents for this exact reason. Because if they blow out, you're not going to be able to replace that NOI, and you're going to be stuck holding the bag, and your value, you're going to be upside down in it. So that's price per square foot, super important, and rent. Make sure it's below market. I won't even look at something if I think it's over market. There's just
Over market on the rents.
Even if I'm getting a great cap rate, I still am like, no, I can't replace that income. It's just too risky.
Again, and the reason for that, for those that maybe aren't as familiar with commercial, is because rents drive the NOI, which then drives the value of that property for the most part, right? The value of that asset, the value of that building. So rents in the commercial world are everything. Yeah.
And let me also touch on some other challenges that I'm having. Let's just kind of open kimono right now. and office and retail are really, everything's kind of up in the air right now, right? People don't know how they're going to use office right now. They don't know what it's going to look like. So and frankly, if it doesn't have a drive-through, they don't really know what the retail is going to look like. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and it's a little bit scary to be doing office and retail, which is, I've paused on acquisitions of office and retail for right now, just because I think the tenants have, and I've got to have a better sense of what tenants are going to do so that I know what kind of income I'm going to have. But it's scary. I mean, we could go through the whole reasons why, what tenants are thinking, but I mean, everybody can understand.
Yeah, for sure. Depending on who you are.
Yeah. So that's a big issue I'm dealing with right now.
No,
and then price exploration is so difficult to try to peg values right now, because you don't know how the space is going to absorb, and you don't know what rate tenants are going to pay. So I don't know how to value things right now. And I don't think I'm alone in that, right? From a commercial standpoint. Now, from a residential, I mean, people, you kind of know that how people are going to want to live and where they're going to want to live. But on the commercial side, it's pretty up in the air.
No, I can see how that's a problem. So Tucker, we have about 15 minutes left. So I want to get to kind of some of the maybe highlight one other deal, and then we could talk about typically how you would finance, and put together the money on something like this. I think that would be cool to look at. And then as you're going to Extra Space, I mean, an asset, it's something like this. And now Roger's on the call, and he's really interested in storage. Is this something that's doing well right now? This is something you built out in West Valley, right?
Yeah. So I'm super glad I built this, because this has been great. This product type, people are leasing it. It's hard to understand why people are still leasing it during this time. Read the national tea leaves, and people are still out leasing up, 10 by 10s. But yeah, this has been great. This is on West Valley. I built it and opened up about 14 months ago, 500 units. And I just checked this morning, we're at about 95% occupancy. So we're stabilizing this deal. Glad I built it because it's a good hedge against the other asset types.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, okay.
And then Tucker, if you're okay, one person asked, I'll send out these slides to everybody if that's okay, just because
yeah, for sure.
Someone wanted to know the building. And then Nora, I know where this property's at, so I can send you privately like a link to, the exact addresses. We don't need it. We were not going to have time to do that right now, but I will get that to you. Anyone else that wants it, shoot me a message. So this one's great for people in the residential world as well as commercial, because you're kind of merging both worlds right here, right?
Yeah. So just quick background on this. This one sat on the market for a long time. It was a Wells Fargo bank up in Clearfield. And it's nice to have, I guess, I mentioned I hadn't bought one that's on the market. I actually did buy it on the market. It was on the market for well over, I think, a year. But it was a seller, an institutional seller like Wells Fargo that just has this on their books. Those are great people to buy from, right? Because they're not trying to get every last dime like an individual would. So I looked at this and it is such an ugly building. It looks like a bunker, right? Mm-hmm. It was very, very confusing on how to figure out what to do, but I knew that there was something there because of the value, and it was on 2 acres. So I put it under contract, and believe it or not, they gave me like 9 months to go and figure it out, just because they hadn't had any success. So I said, okay, I'll put it. I threw just a ridiculous offer. I mean, it was appraised at like 1.3 or 1.2, and I think I offered 500,000, and they accepted it. And I was like, oh crap! And I said, I want 9 months of like diligence or whatever. And so ended up getting it, and I was like, okay, let's go for it. So I went and met with the city. I had 7-Eleven that was I was gonna do a build to suit for 7-Eleven. And I took in a site plan to the city, and they said, you know what, this is right in the area that we want to do residential. So I looked at it and I said, so you guys can give me multifamily ground here. And they said, yeah, this is what we want. It's going to be zoned that in our next planning meeting in the next 30 or 60 days. And I said, oh, great, this is perfect. So I shifted from a 7-Eleven to multifamily. And going back to my experience, I don't know multifamily, but I just landed into a really cheap piece of basically entitled ground for 42 units.
42 units for a basis of 500 grand. That's awesome.
Yeah. So then I ended up I was going to partner with a multifamily group, and they ended up saying, hey, we'll partner with them. We went through the motions, and then they ended up buying me out on it. So my whole point on this is, if you see a deal and it has the fundamentals, just move your feet. And when you move your feet, things happen, right? Like, I did not know that zoning was happening. So I just went with what I knew, that, hey, maybe 7-Eleven would like it. So I went into the city. I just saw something there that I thought that I'm not saying that I'm a visionary, but I just hustled on it, and people just did not pay attention to it because Clearfield's not sexiest submarket. It's just a weird building. But yeah, that's the story behind that one.
Well, and I'm not going to say this very well, but I was talking with my buddy Laith, who was on one of these calls about a month or so ago. Yesterday, he's helping me with a project, and he made the comment of like all of this disruption, like all of the things that happen in the economy, he kind of believes at some point there's something that just like nature needs to kind of clean itself at times, and that's why there's storms or whatever. But sometimes money just needs to move around, and it takes, sometimes there's money that's just been socked away that something needs to kind of shock the system to get that money out and to get it moving around. And I think that's kind of like a case of here, right? Like Wells Fargo is sitting on this building, and they need to move their money to something else. And so it takes them needing to sell this, and then you need to move money around. And so you're moving it around, and you get someone to buy this. And so like move your feet and things happen. I think that's so huge because at some point there's money and there's deals that need to be found, that need to be moved, and it's going to take someone to do it. And, I think that's the case for all of us doing deals, right? Like we just need to get out there and move and do and find and look and talk, and things are going to happen.
Yeah, especially in today's market. Like I said, it's very unknown what to do in this market. That doesn't mean that I should just go and play golf and sit down. I should try to go out and figure out where deals are now. And figure the market out by trying to do transactions. Not just
deals want to be whatever it is, right? Like there needs to be a reward for somebody. Somebody needs to do something. And so I love what you just said there. Move your feet and make things happen. Okay, cool. I love it. So you sold this one.
Yeah, I got out of it because long story. I could have stayed in as a equity owner, but they made me an offer that it was great, and I just moved on because I didn't know that product. So anyway,
awesome.
Here's an interesting deal. Can you see this one?
Yeah, give us the street. So this is 10th West, and what south is that?
This is in Syracuse, 17th South, Antelope Drive.
Okay.
So this one is interesting, kind of back to moving your feet. I bought this on a UDOT auction, and it was so interesting. If you've never bought from there, this is my first UDOT auction experience, and I just tracked all those pieces of ground that they have, and you'll notice that on those auctions, like at the very last second, people start bidding them up, and the auction ended at like 1 o'clock on a Monday or something, and a person had done one bid like a couple of days before, but no one else has bid, and so I did a bid thinking that, hey, this is going to get bid up the last second, and it started counting down, and no one bid, and I won it. And I was like, oh my gosh, there must be something. Sometimes when you win auctions, you lose auctions, right? Because you're like, what don't I know about this deal? But I ended up buying it for a couple $100,000, and it's a great pad. Now you can see there's we've got Dutch Brothers coffee that's going to be going there. There's a site plan there, and it's just going to be a good little deal that kind of came across by accident. But being able to recognize that was a bargain, and the value of it is probably $500,000 on the low end.
Awesome. So again, kind of finding and having your hand in every source where you can find deals, and then again, taking action, right? Like, I don't know how many people track UDOT auctions, but probably not as many that look on the MLS or the, the offering emails.
It's hard to buy from them because of, they quit claim it to you. They do some weird stuff, and you need to put up 10% the next day, and you have to close within 30 days. And so it's not for the faint of heart. And there's a lot of just gnarly pieces of ground they give you, but sometimes there's a gem there, and that's why going back to like moving your feet and figuring out maybe you'll land one. We only have a few minutes on. This was an interesting one. Did I ever tell you about this one?
Yeah, this is out in Magna.
Yeah, so this was the same thing. This was owned by Kennecott. This was their old headquarters, and 100,000 square feet of office in Salt Lake County. Granted, it's in Magna where there's no real office submarket, but I just saw, it was on over 8 acres of ground. So I was buying it I could tear down the building and make money by selling it to a residential developer, or I could sell off each building individually, or I could lease the building for very, very cheap, like probably the cheapest rent in the county. And the price and the time frame that they were going to give me was just too good. It was, and this one I ended up flipping because I kind of chickened out because at the end we did flip it. Holding 100,000 square foot of vacant office building scared me in Magna at the end of the day. So I don't want to pretend like I'm super tough or whatever, but
you locked it up and found a buyer. You basically wholesaled it, right? So that's awesome.
So that worked out. Let's see here. This one we just closed on Oriental Market on 7th East.
Yep. I can picture where that is.
Yeah, you know where that is?
Yep.
It's been a building that people just drive by every day, but we had national tenants that were very interested in it, and we don't have anybody yet, just because the retail leasing has obviously slowed down the past few months. But I'm confident this is such good real estate that we'll figure something out there. So that's just that was a cold call to a colleague of mine, cold called and then partnered up on it.
Awesome.
Here. Yeah. So I don't know, Matt, if you want to talk through
Yeah.
any.
Let's just kind of wrap up. I think what's been so cool for me to listen as you tell your story is, and I know I keep trying to make an analogy to residential, not on purpose, but more for the, like I know pretty much everyone on this call, fairly well, I think, and some of them not as well, but everybody, all of us at some point, we've moved our feet and we made things happen. We made that cold call. We put an offer in on that building that we maybe, or that property that we didn't really know what we might be able to do with it, but we just made that step, and then all of a sudden it works out, right? So this is just a reminder to me to continue to keep doing that. And also, I mean, you're super smart, Tucker, and you have a huge network and you're a patient guy, but like that Wells Fargo that's been sitting there that you drive by every day, why can't one of us go put that under contract and figure out the same thing, right?
Sure.
So it's, again, like the point of these calls, I think, is to give people some exposure, and myself, right, to like what other people are doing out there, how they're finding deals, but that really anything's possible. And you just need to, again, take action, right? Move your feet. So I like your slide here, read, do something today, network and attend every event possible. And then the final thing is specialize, right? Get really good at doing something, and, before you move on to the next thing.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things. And these are some of the deals that I've done, but getting back to what you're saying about moving your feet, there's so many swing and misses that I've had, and deals that have gotten to, gotten close to the end and didn't go through. There's, I think, Matt, you brought up, when you emailed me, you said, here's some things I want to talk about, like what's your superpower? And I'm not saying I have any superpower, but one thing that I think that's really helped me in this career is resilience, right? And you guys have to feel it, because it is high and low, and there's lots of lows, and you just got to be able to shrug it off. I had somebody give me advice maybe 15 years ago that I thought was the absolute worst advice I've ever heard, that's turned out to be some of the best advice. And they told me, go into every deal thinking that it's not going to close. And I thought at the time, that is so stupid. That is the most pessimistic, horrible attitude to go in. But it's kind of served me well, because it's done a couple things. It's made me stable, right? So that when it does not close, like you're anticipating, that you don't get down. And when it does close, it's a very euphoric feeling. And then all along with that is it keeps me hungry, right? It keeps me hungry. Like, hey, I can't rely on this deal. It's probably gonna die. I'm gonna work my butt off to make sure that it doesn't. I'm gonna do everything I can, but I need to go find a few other, and that's gonna keep me hungry to be able to try to keep the pipeline full, because I can't just rely on that one thing. So that's kind of what's been helped me along this path.
Dude, Tucker, man, I could go on for, hours and hours with you, just like we have in the past, in between classes or going to lunch or something like that. So I feel like I'm discounting you by kind of cutting it off here. I'd like to stick these to just an hour to respect everybody's time, and I appreciate everyone coming. But this has been so good. I'll send out, whoever wants some of these slides and stuff like that, send them to me. And then hopefully this sparks in all of us, the rest of this afternoon, go make that extra phone call, go write the offer on that extra thing, go call someone that you're trying to raise money from, do something, right? And good things are going to happen. Tucker, thanks so much, buddy. I'll hit you up offline. I really, really appreciate it. And you're the man.
All right. Thanks, my friend. Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Thanks so much.